Curtis, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you being here and taking the time. For those that don't know you, that don't know who you are, can you just please very quickly just explain a little bit about who you are and the work that you do?
Yeah, sure. So Curtis Scaplen, I would say I'm a father first, 2 young kids, 10 and 6.
I love it.
I grew up in St. John, New Brunswick, and so Atlantic Canadian roots. I've spent time I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. So
Okay.
as we chatted a little bit off camera, my father founded Royal LePage Atlantic, and
That's cool.
all through my childhood, I grew up with him being involved with multiple businesses.
Okay. Yeah.
I was really lucky to have, my mom from an emotional and spiritual foundation. She was that rock. And then my father was the entrepreneur and always, from a business perspective. And so I had 2 solid parents as foundation for where I am. I left St. John and moved to Halifax right out of university. And I think that my parents wanted me to do everything possible to stay out of the entrepreneurial path. I think they knew the ups and downs. Well, that's
because usually fathers are wanting, their kids to maybe follow in their own footsteps. So your dad did none of that, eh? He wasn't pushing you to carry on the legacy and go into the family business. So at least at the start anyway.
Yeah. So I think maybe, in the background, he thought, maybe someday I could take over the business, but he certainly was encouraging me to learn and grow on my own, which was big. Like I look back and, I'm grateful for that. But the other thing too is, as I know now, and as you're aware, there's a lot of challenges with that entrepreneurial lifestyle. And, and so I think, in his mind, it was that stability and get the education and, get a solid job with a great company and do good work. And, and I got to do that. And I always say, like, grew up as an entrepreneurial family, had this amazing ability to be trained in the corporate world with some of the best companies in the world and family run businesses like Stanfield's and, with Philip Morris International, they're one of the only companies that have remained on the Fortune 500 list since the inception of.
Oh, really?
Right?
Of that list? Okay, wow.
So if you think about as a training ground and what I was able to learn, so I spent time in Toronto with those guys, and then spent a couple of years overseas in a global role with them. So I got to travel and experience and see many different cultures and countries and things like that.
Okay.
So I came back in 2015. I moved back to Nova Scotia.
Okay, sorry. Let's just if you don't mind, I'll just back up a little bit here. What was the impetus for you to want to move out of, the East Coast and go into like the big city of Toronto? Were you like super gung ho, like, you know what? I want to go to the big city. I want to go to the big flashy lights in Toronto. Like, what was your motivation to doing that?
Actually, it was scary as hell.
It was, eh? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, so back when I moved, going from St. John to Halifax was a big move. It's like the big city in Atlantic Canada,
yeah, that's
right?
True,
so that was a big move. And people, back then were thinking, geez, are you sure you want to do that? You want to move? I was really close to my friends and family and obviously tight community.
Yeah.
And then I did that move. And when I got the job with Philip Morris, one of the things that I said was, I don't want to do that job forever. So I started out as a sales territory. So I ran the Halifax territory.
Okay.
Was dealing a lot in small, like the convenience stores. So,
right.
And I just didn't love what I was doing. But the director who hired me said, do a really good job there. And the plan is to get you to Toronto. So I had almost a year to start thinking about that change. And then I could decide later if I really, do I want to go? But it was a no-brainer. Like when I took it, I was thinking like, this is a great opportunity. Probably won't come again in this lifetime.
Yeah.
I was a huge sports fan. The company was going to pay for all my moving expenses, right?
Okay.
There was all of these things to say, like, just do it, right? Yeah. Like we just talked about, like there was just this, I was scared, I was going to go alone. I didn't have a lot of people there. So it was like, just go and, totally grateful for the experience. Like, and I got to enjoy the city too. I lived right downtown and, we got to watch the Jays.
See some baseball games, I was going to say. Yeah. Watch the Maple Leafs hopefully lose. Sorry, I should say I'm a Habs fan, right? So anytime I can cheer against the Leafs is... but yeah, Toronto Blue Jays though. I'll cheer for the Jays. I was going to ask you about this. So Philip Morris, one of the companies you work with, right? So they do tobacco. Is that correct? Forgive my ignorance on that. What was that like for you working in that type of industry? Because I guess I could say, I don't know what the right wording is here, a little bit controversial. It's making products that are like, maybe not the healthiest thing for people. Was there any kind of conflict you had with working for that company? Or is it just like, you know what, I'm going to do a job, selling a product. I'm getting all these valuable skills, get to work on these great projects. Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah. So a mix of both. I had a hard time with the product itself, especially early on. And actually to this day, I've never lit a cigarette. So it's not like it's one of these things that I, got behind the product.
For sure.
And so I toyed with that. I had a lot of discussion around it, but it was a few people that were saying, there's very few companies that are going to give you this level of training and for your personal and professional growth. Yeah. And I did a lot of like due diligence and looking into the leadership and the company itself. And I knew some people that worked there, and they had a lot of great things to say about the culture. I remember the turning point though, this was when I was in Toronto thinking about going to Switzerland. And at that point I was kind of at a crossroads. And I remember one of my best friends, he's South African. And I was like, man, I don't know how much further can I go within tobacco? And he's like, mate, I helped launch Always with Wings in South Africa. Oh, like I do not use the product. I didn't have to endorse the product. Right. Yeah. But to build and launch a new category and to be a part of that and to do, so
just that experience of going to new markets and being able to do things that no one's done before. Like that's almost invaluable knowledge there.
Yeah. And it was just, it was trying to, and the other thing too, the other frame of mind that I had, and this is always, I still believe this to this day, and I say this all the time, I don't undervalue the work that we did there because, again, it goes back to my why now. I'm currently supporting small and medium-sized businesses and trying to help them grow. When I was working with convenience stores, I don't think anybody really knows this. A lot of the times, tobacco would be like 60% of their margin.
Really?
So without that category, the business would suffer. And
interesting.
So we were really helping them. And for me, it wasn't just about selling a product. Like I really got to work with a lot of small business owners there. And that's what really got me started. I would help them with category management, and I would help them with trying to look at what their blended margin might look like rather than just slapping a price tag on it, and learning about their customer and some things that they can differentiate. So I started to work with these guys and really fell in love with that idea of, hey, yes, the path might be through tobacco, but I'm really supporting the small business community here, and I'm enjoying that. So to get to do that at the local level and then do it nationally and then on a global scale, it was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, that's interesting. Can you maybe expand a little bit on the experiences that you had? Because I imagine you'd worked yourself up to go kind of into like a leadership role. Can you just give us a little bit of insight as to what kind of projects you might have worked on, and what are the results that you got from that?
Yeah. So what's interesting, I always said, like, I don't fit very well into roles.
Okay.
So a lot of the roles that even I had within Philip Morris, they were created. So it was either like a new category or new role. And
created for you specifically?
Or for my team or for a group, because it was something new that's happened. So in 2008, when the tobacco regulations hit, I don't know how familiar you are with that, but essentially it was, you're no longer allowed to talk to the end consumer at all. So you're not allowed to advertise, market, anything to do with tobacco.
Right, like no cigarette commercials or
no
anything
cigarette
like that
commercials. You go into a convenience store, back when I first started, it was 12-foot back wall, and that's what you see. And so a lot of the marketing dollars, a lot of the branding and stuff would be around, like, we call it pay to play. You would just buy space in the store and stack, your brand up, and you weren't thinking too much about the retailer themselves. It was more about the product and the end consumer. Well, when the tobacco regulations hit, we were working on a project in Canada. We put together, and I was myself and actually Curtis Graham, who's my business partner now in Leadership and Focus.
Okay, right on.
The two of us were, the first assigned to what's called retail engagement. And essentially what that was is figuring out a way to make sure that the retailer is now your customer, and how do they become the centerpiece. And that's really where that strategy of, I was already doing it intuitively. Mm-hmm. And so it was like, what programs can we do to really support the retailers in helping them grow their business and differentiate ourselves from the competitors?
I see.
Because if it comes down to, okay, you only have so many brands that you're allowed in or so much space, who are the retailers going to choose?
Right.
The ones that are the most valuable to their business. So we started to support them with, a lot of programs around loyalty and customer service, and supporting, educating them on overall business versus just products and things like that.
So I see what you're saying too, is that it's not really even, at this point, it's not even about tobacco. It's about building relationships with your customers and helping them do better work, providing that value for them so that they can be successful. And then when they're successful, they take you kind of along for the ride, I would imagine. Eh?
Yeah. So that was a really cool project. And then based on the work we were doing here, Philip Morris ended up buying out Rothmans, Benson and Hedges. So they had a minority ownership. Philip Morris took majority and bought them out completely. And when that happened, they looked at Canada and saying, look, we can imagine that a lot of other global markets are going to go this way. Go dark, they call it, dark market.
Okay. What
are you guys doing in Canada? So I ended up getting to go overseas and spend time in a global role. It was in brand building, sales strategy. Mm-hmm. And essentially it was building brands in, those markets, but it focused on sales force development and key account development.
Okay.
So major customers, and how we're going to train our sales force to think more of full value for the end consumer. So, those were, and again, coming into different markets and seeing different challenges they have. And I also got to be a part of a project. I led a project that was, very cool. It was called the Commercial Approach, but essentially, 11 different streams all working together to figure out how do we make sure that the customer is more important. So, taking the silos out of the business. So if you're in HR, your decision-making is this good for the end consumer?
Right.
It's not just about, hey, this is my job. You're in IT. How do we make it better so that the sales folks have better support and efficiency so that they can be better at getting to their customer? So the focus all began to say, like, how do you get closer to that end consumer? And everybody is trying to, zero in the focus on what we talked about before, that outside in approach. Like the customer is the most important piece of all of this.
Mm-hmm. You said something that was interesting there. You said that, you went overseas and that they have kind of different challenges. What are the difference in challenges between what you saw overseas versus what's here in Canada and North America?
Yeah. So really it's just the maturity of the market, right? So if you can think about Canada, Australia is a very mature market, and mature business owners where the points of sale might be very different. In some countries they're still, if you can imagine like street vendors on a beach. If you've been to Dominican Republic or you've been to an all-inclusive and you walk the strips and you see all of these little small retail shops, well, those are serviced, maybe differently than here in Canada where you've got a more mature market. So depending on, the market itself, you'd have to shift your perspective of how you would approach the customer or the retailer. So, but some very, very cool, working collaboratively with, different cultures and seeing different perspectives.
That's got to be a cool experience, eh?
Unreal. And if I think about the most value that came from that experience, that word comes to mind, perspective. It's just, to think about from a different, a cultural background or a different challenge that somebody might be facing or different market conditions, and to really you've got to have that empathy or that awareness to open your mind to say, okay, well, what might they be going through without preconceived notions of how it should be done.
Right.
It's more of, like, I haven't thought about that perspective. Let's take a different perspective. And so that, can imagine that all that coming together, it gives you a lot more of an informed choice.
Right. It can really put you in the shoes of the prospective client or what have you. It can make you just a more informed marketer by being able to have that empathy, to be able to see different situations of what somebody might be going through in order to be able to figure out how to sell them at the right point or something like that, I guess. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? Like in terms of, what was this? There was this quote that I read a couple days ago. It was something about don't sell people how you think that they need to be sold to, but sell to them how they want to be sold to. So it's understanding where they're coming from to be able to reach them.
Yeah. No. And I say this to my kids all the time, we've probably heard the saying, treat others how you want to be treated.
Right.
And I would switch that. Treat others how they want
to be treated. Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
It's sort of that same
I think
mindset.
someone said that too. It's not like, that's not the golden rule, but that's like the platinum rule, which is like even better than the golden rule. Yeah. Makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. What did you learn about leadership there? Because you mentioned how you started small and your boss was telling you work your way up and learn some new things, and it would get you to Toronto and do all these great things. Then I imagine you work yourself up into a leadership role, and you're talking about having teams. So what did you learn about leadership through your experience?
I was so fortunate to have so many great sort of mentors, coaches, leaders. And I say those in different capacities because all of them are a little bit different. But, what I would say, I'll give you an example of the type of leaders that I got to work with. So when I moved to Toronto, I was by myself, scared shitless, scared out of my mind, going in, trying to go there for the first day. So I arrived in the office in Toronto super early, day one. No one's there. And I'm like waiting and reception finally comes in. They're like, okay, you go in and grab a coffee or if you want. And I go into the kitchen. So you can imagine this is like a massive.
I was going to say it's probably a big
company,
office, eh?
Big office, very successful business.
Yeah.
And I walk in and there's the CEO, John Barnett, emptying the dishwasher and making his own coffee.
Oh, wow.
And that's the type of, and I'm telling you, like, I learned so much from him in terms of like the humility and the ego was not there, open to learning, really put people first. And his whole leadership team was the same way. I had great leaders all the way through. And that was, I would say, the common theme around leadership was making sure that you're putting other people first and check the ego at the door.
Yeah.
And we could all feel the difference. You can imagine a company that size, the difference when there's somebody that's willing to step on someone's throat to climb their way up the ladder.
Yeah.
So I saw a lot of that. I saw a lot of the things that I didn't want to do. But I was also, I had a boss, and he's still a close friend of mine, Costas Vlahos, and in Switzerland, and he was incredible. Again, moved there by myself. I didn't have any family. Really took me under his wing. I was probably even too junior to do some of the things that I was doing, but he kept putting me in. Had the trust in me to say it's okay to fail. Like if you mess this up, I got your back.
Right.
And that feeling like you're invincible, like you've got this guy who's putting
They're supporting you. Yeah.
Fully supporting you, challenging you beyond what you think you're capable of doing. And
do you think though that he would have done that for anybody, or that he saw that he knew that at least you had the work ethic and you had the right frame of mind to be able to be trusted in getting that responsibility? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's he would say, he loved that about me. Like I was willing to jump in and, speak up in a room full of, senior people where other people would be, maybe a little more shy.
Yeah.
I certainly wasn't afraid to ask questions and be curious and maybe challenge, the whole, it's always been done this way. It doesn't fly. Right.
Yeah.
I've always been like, well, why?
Yeah, exactly.
Why? Have we thought about this? Right. Yeah. And so I think he probably saw my willingness to do that, and he just took it and ran with it.
Right.
But I never really thought about that. It's a good question.
Yeah.
Because I'm grateful that I had that opportunity. And I remember one piece of advice that he gave me, and it stuck with me. I started to be there, and I started to get frustrated because in a global corporation sometimes there's grades or bands or levels, and I was doing the work of people that were getting paid more, and I knew, and I started to like go down that ego path and
some resentment a little bit too.
Resenting and like, why? And he would just say like, he would say, are you focusing on you or are you focusing on the outcome? And he would say, just keep doing what you're doing and the rest will take care of itself. Mm-hmm. Like nobody here knows your level or band or role. So I'm going to continue to put you in those rooms. And it'll all work itself out because you're going to be able, I might not have been able to take those opportunities, right? So it was kind of like that teaching moment of like, get outside, check the ego, stop it, just do the work, focus on the process, and the outcome's going to take care of itself.
Yeah.
If you're only focused on the outcome, that's what you're going to zone in on. It's going to impact the rest of it. You're going to start resenting the whole thing.
That's interesting. I always feel like I totally get what you're saying, and I agree with you 100%. One thing that I find very difficult sometimes is, how do you know to keep pushing forward and to keep focusing on just what you're doing? And how long do you wait for the outcomes if they don't ever get there? Like, I could just imagine people being in a situation where they're at a job where they keep putting forth the work, they're doing that good work, but the raises, the promotions, they never get there. At what point should they be like, okay, well, you know what? Maybe it's time to leave, or maybe I need to think about doing something differently because they aren't working out for themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I've been there. I've been through that. And I think I go back to, I always say, focus on what is it that we can control. So if we're controlling the controllables and we're doing the work and we know that we've put in the work, like at the end of the day and you look in the mirror and you're not just comparing yourself to someone else, but you actually are putting in the work and you see the results and the results are there. And have you had, this is one thing that I love and we can get into, but there is just such a lack of willingness to take the elephant out of the room or to have the difficult conversation. So it's one thing to come home and complain to all your friends and complain to your family and all that, but have you actually given someone else the opportunity to understand where your perspective is or where you're coming from? So a lot of people miss out on that opportunity to have the conversation. So if I didn't have that conversation with my boss, I would have sat probably in resentment and been pissed
just
off,
festering and building,
versus him saying, hey, look, okay, I heard you. I understand, but we'll work together on this, but let's go. If you have a conversation,
that's a really good point.
with the leadership team on the other side or with your boss, and you get a terrible response back, that kind of tells you the culture that you're in.
Yeah.
If you're not able to take the elephant out of the room or have a difficult conversation without judgment or without being pushed down, then that's going to tell you something anyways. Too,
right. That's good. So it's almost, I love that. It's just like gathering information before you make those judgments and before you get that resentment to just overwhelm you and just kind of consume you and then lead you down the dark path. I really love that. That makes perfect sense to me. I have one quick question. When you were talking, you said you first came in and then there's the CEO, John, sitting there, putting the dishes away. Did you talk to him?
Yeah.
Okay. What was that conversation like?
I introduced myself. He knew I was coming. So he spoke to me and just, we had a quick dialogue. So cool. But I just remember that moment. I tell that story quite a bit and he kind of chuckles. He's like, it wasn't a big deal. I was like, it wasn't, because that's just who he is. Right.
For him, it's not, but to hear the CEO of a $100 million, billion dollar, whatever it is, right? Yeah. And he's emptying the dishwasher. Like, you gotta have someone to do that. Like, he doesn't have to do it, but he's leading by example, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too is, one of our values from home when I teach this to companies, or I'll talk about it with companies, is it's caught, not taught.
Caught, not taught. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So what he was doing is emulating the behavior that he's expecting out of other people. He's not telling me to go empty the dishwasher because he's the boss and telling me to do it. With my kids, it's one thing for me to say, eat healthy, exercise, read books. If I'm not doing it, if I'm stuck in a screen, right? So I've got to be the lead. I've got to show them, what the outcome could be if you do lean into that stuff. Yeah. Why is it important to read books? Why is it important to eat healthy? If I'm sitting at home just eating chips and on Netflix and I'm like getting after them because they're not cleaning up or it's not really leading.
So why do I have to listen to you? Right. Well, you're not even doing it.
Right. Yeah. And so that whole, we grew up in that era, of, do what I say, not as I do. And I think that's horseshit. Right?
Yeah, like absolutely.
No, actually show me the way.
Right.
And like, I'll follow.
Just lead the way. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny. I was watching a show with my wife yesterday and it was some mother. She's just on her phone or whatever, screaming at her kid, get off the tablet and this and that. I'm like, you're on there too. This I can't believe it. Yeah. And then I was watching, so I'm like, I can't even watch this anymore because it's like, I know it's just a show, but it's like, what are you doing? Like, this character it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Man.
And I catch, we're not perfect. God.
For sure. Yeah.
But, and I'll catch myself. Right. And, it's a little bit dangerous how accessible everything is in our phones and, the screen time and stuff. But I try, like I said, I introduced their father first. I really, really try. I have a 6-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old son. And I don't have a lot of time with them at this age. So if they're in the morning and they're going, hey, daddy, and I'm like, I'm buried in my phone or buried in my computer. So I really try, even if I'm in the middle of something, like I caught myself a few times getting frustrated, be like, Lucy, like in a minute, or Jack. And now I'm kind of like, you know what, that can wait. Like you want to lock eyes with me. You want those moments. So, it takes work for sure. Cause everything, we're work in progress. Right?
Yeah. It was funny with business. Cause people always say, you hear people talk, oh, business, oh, it's my baby. I'm making my baby. Right. But then you have your actual babies, that are real life in the flesh, and it's good to spend time with them. And your kids are 6 and 10. Mine are 19 and 17 now. And then it's like, before you know it, they're older and they're not going to be coming daddy to you as much anymore. So you want to make time to cherish those moments and be present with them for sure. So that's a great message. When you decided to leave Toronto and then come back here, why did you want to make that decision? Why did you want to come home?
Yeah. So there was a few different things in play. One was we had a baby. We were living in downtown Toronto in a 1-bedroom, 1-bath condo.
That'll do it.
And so, we love Toronto. We love the life there. But, we started to look at, do we add another bedroom? And all of a sudden you're like another $500,000 to add a second bedroom to stay in the city. And then, and then really started to think like, you know what, we didn't move to Toronto to be in the outskirts and to fight traffic. And, probably the defining moment was, getting caught, on the 401 with a baby. We went out for a quick, run to get something, groceries or something. And ended up like 3 hours with a screaming baby. We didn't have the diaper bag with us. No. It was just kind of one of those moments like, what are we doing here? Yeah. And their mom, like we're separated now, but their mom, is originally from Nova Scotia. And so we just thought, and so it started to have the conversation, and I was thinking, you know what? There's probably very few people that were my age at the time that had the experience that I had, that I could come back and actually give back to Atlantic. And
what age were you?
So I would have been 34.
Yeah. Just mid early 30s. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So, to have, gone through my experiences and got to be overseas and traveled to multiple countries, and then being able to come back. And so I started to look at, what are some of the opportunities here? Mm-hmm. And I ended up meeting, she's one of my close friends and mentor now, but Peter Porteous, who was with Stanfield's at the time. And so Stanfield's is a great local company, family run business. It was sort of that mid-size that would be great. You could come in and have some fun and do some cool things with that. So it was that combination of, getting back for a family life to the East Coast, getting more support from family and friends here. And then, what could I, what's next, right? What experiences could I bring back and support, sort of that local business community.
This partnership with Peter, is that happen to do, like you're doing now Action Consulting, is he part of that with you, or is that another venture that you guys are doing together?
So Action Consulting is, that was from the family. We've had that in the Scaplen family for a long time. Mm-hmm. So Curtis Graham is actually my partner. So he's in leadership and focus. And so that started, a few years back, and it was just essentially, we thought it'd be really cool to build a community for leaders. It was going to be this, free community for leaders to come and grow together, and, really good content and stuff. And it came at a transition in his life. He had made a move with his family, and they were downsizing with Philip Morris, and he ended up sort of in between and thinking about like what's next for him. And then we connected, and we've always stayed close. And it was one of these things like, don't jump to the next job. Like we both love this stuff. We've been through some cool so I went to Toronto, and he was my first boss, and then he ended up coming to Switzerland while I was there. So we both were in Switzerland together, both in Toronto, and now business partners. So we've stayed really close and have a lot of the similar values. And we just thought this is really cool to build something together. And we have, and that's really started to evolve now.
So Action Consulting, is that primarily what you're focused on these days?
So the two kind of feed into each other. Action Consulting is sort of the operating company, and they go through, but leadership and focus. So leadership in focus is really about, there's this magic. So all of the businesses, all the experiences that we've had, there's just a magic that happens when brand and culture and leadership are aligned.
Okay.
And John Barnett would be a perfect example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I think about him as a leader, how he acts when I hear him speak, how he acts in the, emptying the dishwasher, and then his expectations of the team and the culture that were there. It's just this magic. Like people, you could feel like there was a good vibe there. So that's really leadership in focus. We've actually trademarked the brand truth alignment.
Okay.
And essentially does the customer voice, are customers saying and believing in what your values and what you're doing and your brand. So you take your marketing material. Is it all fluff, or can you live and breathe that? Your culture internally, do they think the same way about your business as what your end consumer would? And is there full alignment there? So we've done some work with that, and that's, a major problem to solve for especially in that small to medium sized growing businesses. And then the other area that we've really leaned into is business, succession planning and exit strategy and that growth plan. How do you build value within your business so that, when it is time to exit, or is there a transition plan at all to exit? So those are two areas that we're really zoned in.
Okay,
on.
interesting. We're going to get into this succession planning because I think that's really interesting. And you mentioned too about dealing with customers and helping them see, if their brand aligns with, their values and their leadership style and all that. How, for those companies that you work with, how often do you see that they're communicating things that are out of alignment with how they operate? Is it a big problem? It is, eh?
It's probably, and if you take a hard look in the mirror, it depends on, so we have a process to do that, because if I was to ask a CEO or the leadership team, they'd probably think, oh, we're good. So we do an assessment, and the way it started, the way it started was, okay, well, if we're going to do this properly, let me talk to 5 customers, and I'll actually get to the depth interview
of their customers.
5 of their customers. Interview
They're not
their
there,
customers.
it's just you,
Just interview them, record it, whatever. And then I'd say, okay, let me talk to 5 or 10, like as many as you want to give me, but let me talk to some of your employees. Yeah. And then let me talk to the leadership team. And then what we did, and then you just play a gap analysis and see like what common words are there or where the differences are. Yep. And it's telling.
It's a big gap.
It's truth telling at its best. But it's such a good, again, take it back. The companies that are willing to go through this with us, the ego's not there. Yeah. They're willing to look themselves in the mirror, and they're willing to get some feedback. So we know that the glass ceiling for the business and their ability to see this through is based on the mindset of the leadership.
Is the gap really more on the leadership side then, when you're looking at this gap analysis between the leaders and then the staff and then the the customers? Yeah,
in fairness, there are some really good businesses. More often than not, they might have 2 right and they're missing the third link.
Okay.
Or they're really, really strong. Like this got amazing culture that everyone wants to work for, but it's not outside. They haven't figured out a way to market that amazing culture and why customers would want to choose them. Or maybe they've got a really, really strong product that they've done a really good job positioning in the market, but they're just churning through people to get it done because they're focused on selling more of the product, right?
Right.
So it's usually like they've done a good job at it, 2 of them, but maybe not the third, or one's really, really strong, but they haven't thought about. And in fairness, anyone that's in that scale up mode or that growth mode, it's really hard to build that culture when you're trying to, take the next step in the business.
Right.
So it's almost like that slow down, let's do this now, build that solid structure so that when you are growing, you're growing on a strong foundation. And that's the foundation. It's like brand, leadership, culture, complete alignment. Imagine a culture that you walk into that you can take every elephant out of every room. You walk into a meeting and you can have open dialogue and not, that's a different feeling. Or if your customers, one group we worked with is like their customers would call and just give them feedback, like good, bad, ugly.
Right.
And they're still tight and they're collaborating together because they accept that. It's not a push and pull thing.
The customers want a better experience and the the business wants to give a better experience for the customers. It's just like a win-win in a sense.
Right. So it's just that willingness to like take feedback and understand where you are, what you're good at and what you're not, and lean into some of those areas.
Yeah. So the clients that you typically work with then, is it better that they have somewhat of a little bit more of established business in the sense that you do have customers that you can talk to, or that there's, like leaderships or staff like kind of in place? Do you know what I mean? Do you work with even solopreneurs or people that are just kind of starting out their business to kind of give them a little bit of lay of the land to maybe lay down the proper foundation?
Yeah, I've tried to stay away from the startup community. When I first started consulting, I thought that was going to be it, right? Like, dive into the startup. It's great. I've shied away from what I would call the traditional, like innovative startup companies. Yeah. But again, it goes back to the mindset of the leader. So I've definitely worked with solopreneurs. Mm-hmm. I've definitely worked with, just a small teams. Real estate agents as an example, they can look at the same fundamentals, right? So, customer values, do they align with who you are authentically as a brand? So you're the brand, right? I just did a session this morning on personal branding and how important it is to be consistent and follow through, and what's your personal brand, because that's going to be your brand in the marketplace. Yeah. So branding is more, individual, but you're the brand, let's say. And then, from a customer perspective, what's the feedback you're getting, right? Are you just focused on the transaction, or are you focused on sustainable long-term building that growth, right? Yeah. I'm not focused on just the quick wins and making money. No, they saw value through the whole process, right? And then from a culture standpoint, like if I'm working with a solopreneur entrepreneur, the culture might be who's your inner circle, who you spending your time with, or who's the brand you're choosing. If you're a real estate agent, are you choosing a company that's going to support you the way you want it? Because, even with real estate, if you think about all the big brands out there, or even the smaller ones, you probably have a sense of what their culture might be. So it's just important to find that alignment, whether you're one person, whether you're, a 3 people going to 12, or whether you're even in the bigger businesses. I think the best companies in the world get that right.
One of the words that I hear thrown out quite a bit is accountability. When I say that, what do you think about when you hear that word and what it means as a business owner?
I think it's a life hack. I think, I just had this conversation with my 6-year-old and 10-year-old. Like, I joked around and I said, you guys are going to dominate life because, we're accountable. We have to be accountable. We're learning from mistakes. There's integrity. We're showing up. We're consistent. We're putting in the effort. We're treating people with respect, right? So accountability, especially self, to be able to look yourself in the mirror and be accountable. And, if you make a mistake, to own it, to show up and apologize, to follow through. Amazing that follow through is a competitive advantage, but just actually doing what you say you're going to do. Right. So I think, accountability is lacking these days. And I honestly think that if you were to lean into an area of life, and just that accountability would be one that I would put very high on the list.
Yeah. So for people that are listening today that are starting their own business, or they're kind of newer in their journey and they want to take more accountability, what steps could they take? I mean, I guess you mentioned, just like follow through in the things that you say that you're going to do, make sure that you do them. But is there anything else that they can do in order to start being able to take accountability in their day-to-day?
Yeah, I went through it. So I went through, hell on earth, myself, and went through some challenges and almost had to rebuild that confidence. And I call them confidence credits, because you have
confidence credits.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you have to rebuild the confidence in a way that, you're building that trust within yourself. And so again, inside out, it starts with you. The accountability starts with you. So to the outside world, it might look like you've got everything together, but really at the end of the day, you're looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, like, could I have done more? Could I have shown up differently for myself? Am I looking after me? So I would say for anyone like starting out in business, I would say start with the inner journey first, like whether it's what you do, drink water in the morning, exercise, some things that you can control to build the confidence credits and stack the small wins. Yeah. To your point, we had that conversation earlier about like, hey, you're starting out, if I say I'm going to make 5 calls today, make the 5 calls.
Yeah, make 10.
but just at least make the 5, so that way you're accountable to yourself.
Yeah.
You're saying I'm following through on promises that I made to myself. And then when you start doing that on a small basis, you stack those confidence credits and you put those in the bank, right? So I think it would be just, starting small. Like the human brain, especially if you're an achiever or you want to envision and imagine life, like we want to think like really big, right? So I would say think big, think as big as you want to do, but act small. Like act like within the small steps, like control what you can control. What's the very next best thing you can do rather than getting lost? And that usually starts with doing the next best thing, right? If it's, hey, I told the customer I was going to call them at a certain time, I'm going to do that. I promised myself I blocked in my calendar that I'm going to work out today. I'm going to do that. Right. So accountable to yourself, and then the confidence builds up, and then it's a lot easier to be accountable to others.
Right. It's almost as if don't try to change the world in like one day, in a sense. Just take these small little steps. And then before you know it, who knows how far that's going to take you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's overwhelming, right?
That's right.
It's overwhelming to think that you're going to do everything, or think about all the things that you have to do. Like you think about your to-do list. My mom, she passed in March, but one of the things that she would always say is, cause I can get, we can all get the anxiety going, or you're overthinking, and I'm in my head and I'm just like, what if? And she'd say, Curtis, like, you're getting ahead of yourself again. What's the next best thing that you can do? Like literally, like what can you do? Is it go for a walk? Maybe it's just, hey, jump in the shower, get some food. Right. And then let's talk in a little bit, but what's the next thing that you can do, rather than, cause we get into that spiral mode of, overthinking or thinking too much about the what ifs. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I have that voice in my head all the time, which grateful for, but it's always like, wait a sec, you're getting too far ahead of yourself. Like, what can I do right now in the next hour, in the next 30 minutes? Yeah. And like really narrow that focus.
Right. Have the big goals, plan the big goals. That's great. But also don't get caught in the big things, get down into the little things that you can do on a day-to-day basis.
And the other thing too, I'm glad you brought up big goals, because, that's one thing. If we are focused on the outcome, so if we write the goal down and then we see it, and let's say it's a fitness goal. Someone says, I want to lose 30 pounds. Yeah. Okay. So you write the big goal down, and you're accountable to yourself. You're working out, you eat healthy. Yeah. You mess up and you have cheat days, whatever. Right. But at the end of the day, in 6 months, you've lost 28 pounds. Are you upset with yourself? Right?
Yeah, maybe, but you shouldn't be, because, I feel like some people might, some people won't.
And that's if you're only outcome focused, but then it's like, no, I've built in the habits. I've built in the process. I was accountable to myself. Now the process is like, I'm healthier. Like the wins aren't going to come from the outcome. It's going to come from like, what habits did you build along the way?
It's the process. Yeah. It's like enjoying the journey. Or what is the saying? It's not about the destination. It's about the journey, or whatever.
Yeah.
But I guess the goals though, would you say it's good to have goals though? Because at least it helps you steer what you need to do on the day-to-day to get there, so that you can get those processes and those habits in place to get to those goals. Like you said, you might not reach it. You might get 28 pounds, not 30. But it doesn't matter, really. What matters is everything that you've accomplished to get even to that point.
Yeah, no, I would 100% agree. And that's when you talked about leadership, some of the things that I've learned from other leaders, and that was, clarity around a goal or vision, like crystal clear on what success looked like.
Yeah.
Right. And again, it wasn't about like beating them with a stick if we didn't get there. It was just that everybody was completely clear on what the goal is,
right?
Whether it's from a smaller project or from our big vision goals, that clarity and where are we going? What's the North Star?
Yeah.
And when that clarity is there, you get a lot more people aligned to it, rather than if no one is, we see it sometimes with our, with some smaller teams or with some of the cultures that we work in. And, when you talk to their people, and 5 people are saying different things on what would be the most important thing to accomplish, or what does success look like in my role. And they don't know how their success ties into the overall success.
Right.
Right. So that clarity of the goal or the North Star or the vision is a big part of what a solid leader would put in place.
So speaking of leadership, in your experience, what would you say is the biggest mistake that leaders tend to make, or mistakes that you see them making?
I don't even want to get, down the political path here, but
we go wherever you want to go.
Yeah, no. So it's when ego enters the room.
Yeah.
And we can see it or feel it. Everyone feels a difference. But the minute that ego enters the room, that common theme or the common goal or that alignment is gone.
It throws everything on a whack.
If you're leading from a place of ego and not surrounding yourself with smart people, and if you're always need to be right, or you're coming down and beating with the stick, and if you're leading from a sense of ego, you're not getting the most out of your people.
Yeah. How does that manifest? If somebody is leading from ego, how do people recognize that in themselves or other people? Like you said, it comes down with a hammer fist. They always have to be right. What else do people need to watch out for?
So just from my experience, you think and I'll use an example of a youth hockey group. Are you going to get more out of a 10-year-old kid, if you're yelling and screaming at them and like you're the voice, you're the strongest voice, or, are you going to get more out of them if they are like feel safe and comfortable and the willingness to make a mistake, right, and they know that they're encouraged to fail because they're going to grow from it. Right. Yeah. So that manifests in like fear, and they tighten up. So if you're always
hold the stick too tight,
hold the stick too tight, batting, right? You're trying too hard. You're worried about getting yelled at, or you're not comfortable. You're not loose. You're not having fun, right? And in sports, we always say that. Like you mentioned the Habs. I just made a comment yesterday. I'm not a Habs fan, but I'm a huge fan of that group, and I think Martin St. Louis is he's done amazing things at putting culture in play and an expectation of that collaboration, and you can see how tight they are as a group. Like that's not going to happen without the leadership,
right,
of allowing that safety and making sure that they're not a bunch of superstars or just ego driven, right? So it manifests in the outcomes of the day to day. If absenteeism is high, if people on Sunday night are worried about coming into work on a Monday morning, or they don't feel, you have your smartest people not willing to speak up in a meeting. Right. That's if it's ego driven, and you're going to stifle creativity and that collaboration. And I've seen that, multiple times, but it's a hard balance.
I was going to say, it's got to be hard to get someone who is a leader to change if they are egocentric, because they are full of ego. That's almost another reason why they want to give it up, because they always think about themselves in a sense. I don't know. Or can people change?
I think they can buy into a vision, but leadership style itself. And the problem is, I think that it's been rewarded too much in the past, that pound your fist, typically male-driven, power-hungry type leadership.
Yelling at everybody.
It's kind of been, rewarded. And I think we all know that we get more out of people when we're, leading with vulnerability and empathy and that safety. Think about a family. Think about a household. If you're always not feeling safe at home and you're going to get yelled and screamed at and stuff, you can feel the difference.
Or you're doing the dishes and you break a plate. Oh my God, I'm going to get yelled at.
Spill the milk, right? Yeah. So, I think the style of the leader, it really reflects the culture. And I think from a leadership perspective, I know I want to surround myself with people that want to make me feel safe and seen and heard. And, I think as a human, we all want that. And can I switch to the, when you're urgent and there's things that need to get done, and it's just like, well, fuck it, I'm going to do it myself. Or, I can feel myself even as a parent, and you're just like, right? Like, so I think it's, leadership is a skill. I really, really do believe. I don't think you're born a leader, or you're, born. I think you're born with certain maybe temperaments and personality style,
certain aptitudes to certain things.
If you're open-minded and you're willing to, learn, and again, that word perspective, if you're open up your mind to other people's perspectives, and, the truth is, if you think that you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably the dumbest person.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, that totally reminds me of a movie, Rounders. I don't know if you've seen that,
Yes.
but it's like, if you're what is it? You can't spot the sucker at the table in the first 30 minutes, like you are the sucker or something.
Oh,
it's kind of
yeah,
something
yeah.
like that or whatever. I hear a lot about this, about the difference as a leader being nice versus being kind. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about the difference and like your thoughts on that?
It probably took me a long time to figure that there's a big difference. And I think probably earlier on in my life, I would have defaulted to, the nice side of it. When I say that, I go back to taking the elephant out of the room. So the nice guy or the nice girl, they might not say, hey man, you have spinach in your teeth, and let you walk into that meeting with spinach in your teeth, right?
Yeah.
Or they might not, because they don't want to offend any, or they might not, they'll even in a group, you're in a group and, we've just spent 2 or 3 hours together, and then I leave, and then a bunch of people come in and they're saying, shit talking Curtis. Well, the nice guy might not want to interrupt that flow and just let that go.
Yeah.
But I think a kind person is going to give you feedback, right?
Yeah.
They're going to say the hard things because they're invested in your growth, and they truly, are willing to have that hard conversation.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference between like kindness. My kids have 3 superpowers. We talk about that all the time.
Okay.
And kindness is one of them, right? And kindness means, it's that integrity. It's doing the right thing. It's about, even when people aren't in the room, you've got someone's back, right? That's there. Nice is kind of like, just let it slide. I think, kind is different. Kind is like, it would be unkind for me to let you go on without calling you on something that's like legit, or me expressing an opinion or having a different perspective. So, I was probably, Gary Vee talks about this a lot, actually. He talks about like how hard it is for him to be candid to people because they're good people, but like to say that they suck at their job, right? But so, yeah, you don't say that you suck at your job, but if you don't start, like if you're in a 12-month performance review and at the end of 12 months, there's a surprise coming and you haven't given them any feedback along the way, how kind is that?
Yeah.
Right?
It's not kind at all.
Not kind at
Absolutely.
all.
Yeah.
Right? So just that, being willing to have hard conversations, being truthful, being honest with a legit intention of helping the other person.
That's what I was going to say. There's ways to go about saying things. Like even just the broccoli in the teeth, right? It's not like, hey, fucking you idiot, you got broccoli in your mouth. What's wrong with you? As opposed to like, hey, I just noticed you got some in your teeth. You just want to, and then there's 2 completely different ways of saying the same thing. So I think it depends on like just even your delivery and how lead from a place of, I want you to succeed. I want what's best for you. So I'm going to tell you this because it's going to help you, and not be too afraid to say anything, which is even worse.
Yeah. And the why, like, we talk about that a lot. The why matters. It always has for me. Like, why don't I want you to walk into the room? Well, you're about to go on and do a presentation in front of a bunch of people. I thought you might want to know, right?
Yeah.
So again, intentions and the why behind some of that stuff. But certainly it's not, I always try to check myself, like, am I a nice guy? I think Matthew McConaughey uses the example of, a nice guy might let someone slide, get away with, a comment to his wife. A kind guy is not, right? Like there's a difference of that,
sure.
What's going to happen. Right. So kindness is a superpower, and kind and nice are very different in my opinion.
Okay. I want to just circle back to family business and the conversation you had with your dad, and there's the dynamics between your mom as well too. We're going to kind of get to that, but you mentioned before, I think I read somewhere, you sat down with your dad and you had a conversation with him about kind of taking over and retooling the family business. What was that conversation like with your dad? Because I think it was like his business was kind of stagnant for a while, and then you decided to revitalize it. What was that conversation like?
Yeah. So Action Consulting Group was the business, and there's been many businesses flow through that, and it's always been. So we got action.ca when like the internet first started. Yeah. And he jumped on that domain, and we've actually been had a few interesting offers.
I was going to say that's a pretty good
when
domain.
It was stagnant, right?
Yeah. Can you speak to what those offers were?
Oh, it's in the thousands, right? It was quite a bit of money, especially when I wasn't in between, when I was in between corporate and trying to start on my own, and you think like, should I just sell the domain and restart? So,
get a lot of capital.
Action Consulting was, we kept it alive, and it was always there. It was sitting on the shelf, and at the time I was considering, whether I go work for another company or do I actually like do it through Action. And so that was a conversation of, I want to get out on my own, but I don't necessarily want to just go fumble around. And he's like, wait a second, we have this, this company, it's already established. It's got a domain. It's, it's got some history to it. It's got a cool logo, all this stuff there. It's not, it's had multiple different businesses through there. It's got some recognition in Atlantic Canada, take and run with it. So, so that was really the conversation and then it was nice because the first time I took a client, I could do it through the business. And then you start to recognize all the valuable things of running revenue through your business and expenses through your business. And so that was the first kind of my first look at what that was like, which was really interesting. So it was, and one of the things that he said to me was, you keep working for all of these other people. And this is the shift, right? Because you remember, like, he was probably pushing me down the corporate path, and then I just get disappointed, or like, I jumped out and done the entrepreneurial thing, but for someone else's business, and I've helped multiple other entrepreneurs and do their thing, but always as more like an employee, or maybe it's a part shareholder or whatever. But it was that conversation of, this will never leave you. So regardless of what happens, like, you've got this to fall back on. It's yours. It's your business. Like, you're the final decision maker. You're the CEO. Like, all the buck stops here.
Yeah, everything goes through. Yeah.
And so, are you ready for that challenge? And, and so it was an interesting conversation. And obviously there's some emotional connection to the brand and things
for sure.
Like that. Yeah.
So what's really fascinating, I mean, there's lots of things that are fascinating with this, but one thing that I want to talk about is, because you now do succession planning and you help other people figure out how they can sell their business and, get it ready for selling and all that kind of stuff, which I want to get to. But was you wanting to have this as a service, is that because of the experience that you've had with your dad and him kind of passing that on to you, or is it something completely separate from that?
Yeah, I can't say it was like that aha moment, but certainly his experience with, founding Royal LePage and having multiple partners, and then him going through that change, and me watching, going through some, different shareholder situations and the family business and kids not wanting the business, and watching that dynamic play out within the family, and just kind of standing back going, holy crap, like, they haven't really had these conversations yet. Yeah. And also, kind of fell in, like, with the first few clients, there's a couple of things that sort of fell on my lap. So COVID started, and when COVID hit, I think, especially in Atlantic, like, there's a lot of people or entrepreneurs that are older that think they're going to live and work forever. And
it's like that baby boomer generation, right?
Generation where they're like, I'm going to work forever. And they don't really think about the time when they might not be running the business or might not be working. Yeah. So, and then COVID hits and the economy suffers a little bit. And then you see a lot of people going, I really haven't had this conversation. I haven't thought about what it looks like. So multiple clients kind of came to me and said, can you help me with this? And there was no formal process involved at the time. It was kind of like stumbling through and figuring out a way. And so I started to dig into it a lot. But certainly my father had gone through that with, growing Action, and then, basically merging and creating Royal LePage Atlantic, and then having multiple partners and what that dynamic looked like. And then I also worked for multiple family businesses, and I could see, those dynamics, and, the succession planning and the conversations that are or not happening
Right.
there.
Yeah.
So it was more of that, like just watching. And I got to, one of the first times that I actually helped sell a business, I had the opportunity to work with Keith and David Dexter. So Keith brought me in on helping one of his clients get out of, basically fulfill his dream of owning McDonald's franchise. But first off, had to sell the family business that had been, 3 generations in business.
Oh, wow.
And so how do we do that so that everybody's happy, right?
Yeah.
So that was a really cool experience. And, I just, I had the opportunity to help a law firm. She was the principal of a law firm, thinking like, geez, I can't even really take vacation, and I want to back away a little bit, but I don't know what that looks like. And having the ability to help her like bring in partners and solidify that. And, we're still very close to this day, and she's actually grown her business, but still been able to take some time off for herself. So just allowing people to see the many options that are there for the transition versus just closing their doors or letting it go.
Yeah.
And so that was, that's the why behind, why that's so important to us.
Yeah. It's really fascinating because I feel like there's a really big opportunity here, because I don't know what the exact numbers are here. So please, guys, don't get upset at me here, but it's like, I don't know if 70%, 80% of businesses, even just within Canada alone, are small businesses. And like you said, there's baby boomers now that are, running and operating a small business. They probably don't even have a plan in place in terms of this. Like, what are they going to do with their business afterwards? Are they even just going to close up shop? So there's got to be a lot of opportunity. So if people are having a business and they don't want to just close the doors, what can they do and what steps can they take in order to get their business ready for having someone come through the door and want to actually purchase it? And they could come away with, a good amount of money, after they sell.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And actually when I first looked at the stats in terms of like how I would support small and medium-sized businesses, it's actually higher. It's like 90% plus would be considered by Stats Canada, like a SME, small and medium-sized enterprise.
Yeah.
So you think about that, like the large corporations own like 8 to 10% of the market. The rest is like local, small and medium-sized businesses that fuel the economy.
It's crazy though, because you think in our day-to-day, all we interact with are the McDonald's and Nike and whatever, but there's like 90%, like it's such a huge number. We don't even really realize it.
It is. And just that shift, if you can think of just one way to shift sort of spending to local, because it really does make an impact to the local community.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm guilty as the rest of my kids.
Yeah.
Go to
for sure.
Get Starbucks here and there, or, you're at McDonald's, but
it's easy to go to Walmart. Oh, it's cheaper at Walmart. It's like, it sucks, but
well, the good news is like, some of the bigger corporations have done good at trying to get local suppliers and sourcing locally and stuff too. Yeah. So, there is a supply chain there.
Right.
Least. but from the business perspective, it's actually, it's like a huge opportunity, but a problem at the same time, which normally is the case. So 70% of those businesses don't have any sort of succession or transition plan.
Oh, that's crazy.
And the other ones that do have probably just had like, it's a conversation, or they might have an idea of what their business is worth, but they haven't really thought about like what that entails. So if you can imagine, so you asked, what could they do? I think again, goes back to that first step of starting the conversation. What are my options? So the ones that I've worked with, they would just think like, well, it's not worth it. I'm just going to close my doors. Well, can you imagine taking $100 a month or investing in the stock market for 20 years and then just like closing your account at the end of it, nothing back in return?
No returns.
So first off, like that's not your best option. So there's always, an option there. So having the conversations, what are my options? As an example, is it, I'm gonna work for 3 to 5 more years, and like we'll put some processes and tools and steps in place. So I actually recently took a value builder accreditation. So I'm a certified value builder, and essentially what that is to help businesses with that. How do I build value within either a growing company that might exit way down the road, or somebody that might have a few years left and they want to get something back from their business, and it's based on the book Built to Sell. And it's funny because, again, intuitively we were kind of doing some of this, but now there's actually tools and systems and process in place, which makes a big difference for both sides.
Yep.
So, but when you think about having that conversation and seeing that there are options, or understanding where are some of the areas that I can really zone in on and focus that are going to make a big return on my investment. Like one, as an example, is, we talked about it a little bit before, is that, the rainmaker's dilemma, or that the owner is, do they have a business or do they create a lifestyle where they are the business? Right.
Right. That's a big difference there.
And there's a big difference. But is there a way that, okay, you want to back away in 3 to 5 years? Can we help you find somebody that can come in and work with you for 3 to 5 years and maybe take over a portion of it, or lower the amount that it's solely focused on just the owner, right? Mm-hmm. And so, again, it goes back to systems and tools and processes and things like that. But there's so many options that you just have to start the dialogue and know, okay, well, let's have a conversation, because I could sell it now. If I need to exit right away, I could sell it. It might not be ready for sale. So what are some of the things that we can do in the short term? Maybe it's 3 to 6 month plan to get the financials in order.
Yeah. Get the books in order. Yeah. That'd be important. Yeah.
Right. Like there's certain things that have to be done. Or is it, hey, do you want to retain ownership here and like stay as a minority partner and maybe like bring partners in? Mm-hmm. Or, you have a plan to be out in 5 years. Let's find an awesome younger operator, keep the business in the community. Maybe it's somebody that's growing within the community that there's ties to the family or connection with, and they can come in and slowly transition it out. But that there's a transition plan in place. And again, it's a win-win-win.
Yeah.
And I always look at that too. Like if a business just closes their doors, like people don't understand the social economic impact of that too. Especially in rural communities, right? A business closes their doors. Well, if they had a few employees and those people are at a job, the retirement fund, if they don't get a lot for the business, then, they're not necessarily as wealthy as they thought they might have been. So that impacts like how much are they going to reinvest into the community, right? So there's all of these factors that are considered.
Especially if a business is actually doing well in business, right? If they've been alive or been in business for 20 years or whatever, and they just close down. Not because they're not doing good business, but just because they've had no plan. Like that's a shame. It's such a shame.
Yeah. And too, on the other side of that, we talked a little bit about the startup or entrepreneurial standpoint. I think there's a lot of people that think being an entrepreneur is sexy, or that buzzword or startup community is sexy. Yep. If I'm young or graduating from college or school, I'm going to find an owner operator that I can work with for a period of time. So imagine, you graduate from university and you've got $60,000 to $100,000 in debt, depending on what you've taken. And then you go get a job for $40,000 or $50,000.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's more than that, but you're in a job versus, hey, I'm going to go work in a business. I'm going to learn everything there is about business. I'm going to learn about HR and marketing and supply chain and production. I'm going to learn about business and also work with an owner who has an existing customer base, and then potentially take over that business. Different conversation altogether.
Oh, 100%.
So as an entrepreneur, don't just think startup. Like there are other ways to come in, and there's so many different businesses. Like find a business that you think you might enjoy and like approach an owner and say like, hey, I'd like to work with you, or because there is an opportunity for that transition to take place. And a lot of those businesses that are older, they might just need modernization, or they might need somebody with thinking differently. So there is an opportunity to connect those dots. But again, you said, what are the steps? It's really first having the conversation and being real with yourself about what I have and what I have not. And then saying, okay, once you have a picture and you realize some options, then we can start to figure out what's the next best step for
find
you.
A match for you or what have you. So I want to dive into this because I think this is super fascinating, and I'm really interested in this as well too, because I think the opportunity there is so huge. And if I was to start over right now today, I'm 100% with you. I would look for a business to buy as opposed to start from scratch, because why start from scratch? Why try to reinvent the wheel? And I hear what you're saying about entrepreneurship. People think it's like super sexy, and I was totally bought into that. It's like, oh, I gotta invent the next Facebook. Oh, I'm gonna have this company. I'm gonna put it out there. I'm gonna make $10 million, and like I'm gonna be huge, and like all that stuff. And it's sexy, but it's also very rare. why not start at something that's already established? So all of that being said, if I wanted to buy a business, and you probably heard Cody Sanchez, she talks a lot about this, about buying, boring businesses or what have you. And she talks a lot about being able to make these zero equity deals. And I would imagine there's great opportunity to find people, like you said, that are looking to transition and approach them and say like, hey, I'm a new guy or whatever. I want to learn the ropes. And are you willing to take me on? And we can do some kind of business transaction where I can take over your company. But instead of me paying you cash, because maybe I don't have cash, maybe we can do some kind of equity deal or what have you, and then go forth. Like, is that a lot of, like, are you seeing people talk like this and have make these types of deals for their transitions? Or is it, is that a little too much?
I don't know. I haven't, I get it. I understand the theory and I think it's possible. But I also think that it's not very often that I think you got to be careful about that. Like, to come in and take over a business with no money or no skin in the game, it's very rare. Not to say it can't be done. I haven't personally seen it. I have seen very little funding. I've seen the willingness and like that fit of the culture. So, I go back to the paving company I talked to you about, that where, the person wanted to open up a McDonald's franchise. Well, the person that came in didn't necessarily have a lot of liquid cash. They had some, but it was that the bank understood the two players, that there was a willingness from the existing owner to, do a vendor take back or to hold some of the cash until, or to stay co-signed on a loan or these types of things, right? There's things that are willing to be done. If everybody's involved, if there's a buy-in for the better, like a win-win-win, community wins, community wins, owner wins, new person wins. Yeah. But the whole zero equity, I'd be careful with that. Yeah. The banks also
not zero equity, but like zero down, I guess.
Yeah,
that's kind of what you mean. Eh?
So zero, yes.
This is my ignorance and not knowing the bank terms.
No, it's fair. It's fair. And I'm sure it can be done with the right approach. But essentially, the banks, the current, if I'm advising a business owner, I would say like try to get some skin in the game, even if it's like 50K, 100K, something from the other party, so that they've got skin in the game there and like everybody's in. But but to your point, there is a big need for it. There's an opportunity there. And I think, there's not like a really good market either of this, where do I go to find these businesses? And oftentimes it's just a matter of understanding the community and your networks and being willing to approach the right.
There's no localbusiness.com or forsale.com or some website like that, I guess.
Well, there is, but oftentimes it doesn't hit there, right? Until it might be too late, or maybe a business has decided to shut down. But those, the key thing is, go in with eyes wide open. Don't think that it's going to be easy, because whether you're starting from fresh or you're coming in to take over a business, there's still going to be challenges. It's hard work and it's challenges, and just being willing to. But if you're looking at it from how does everybody win from this? How can I be of value to the current owner and the bank see that there's I would say like a good jockey there that has a good story and a good work ethic.
Like if it's an older building that still does all the invoicing or receipts by hand or something like that, and you're like, hey, I know how to modernize this thing. I could make sign up forms or whatever. Here's how we can get the customers to flow in and how we could increase efficiency or, bring it to the modern age. I guess that would be something that you could bring to the table to a business. Say, hey, listen, this is how I can help. And my experience. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, the key thing is really about understanding where the value is, so some big areas where an existing business could benefit are things like, reviews, customer reviews and testimonials. Like, a lot of businesses haven't done the extra work to get on the 5-star reviews or get on Google reviews or to have that testimonial video feedback so that someone else is telling your story, right? Can you build recurring revenue into your business? Yeah. Well, that's a big one, right? Because a percentage of your revenue that's coming over and over takes away the less risk. Can you sign longer term contracts with some of your businesses that, kind of solidify some of that base level income that's going to support your business. So these are all things that, coming in, looking at the business with a new set of eyes, you might have different ideas of how to approach that.
How important is it for people that are entrepreneurs to understand the language of business and understand the language of finance? Because I'm just listening to you here and you're throwing out a lot of these terms and I'm understanding most of them, but there's some of them I'm like, oh yeah, I don't really know very much about that. I really don't know about financing options and stuff like that. How important is it to know these things?
Again, like what we just said, it's like jump in. You're going to learn.
Just jump in. Eh?
I knew nothing about it. Was probably very green in terms of, especially around financing and around some of the types of deals. Obviously, some financial acumen and understanding will be key, but that can be learned.
Yeah.
Honestly, like if an entrepreneur was coming to me and they had like crazy work ethic, the character was there 100%, they were awesome with people, they had relationships, like the rest of that can be taught. And, or, you bring in a CFO or you bring in people that surround you, but, obviously financial acumen's huge, but I'd rather bet on the character over competence and teach the competence.
Right. That all makes a lot of sense. Character is super, super important. And I want to bring the conversation to your mom, because your mom was really important to you. And it sounds like she was very instrumental in building up your character. What are the lessons that she taught you?
Try not to get choked up here. With my mom, so just a bit of backstory here. She was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and was given months to live, and then basically battled for almost 7 years. So it kind of gives you an idea of, the spirit and the fight that was there. So for her, it was just this solid foundation, no judgment, gonna have your back. Just that pure, safe spot. And that was just like, okay, I can come on the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, but also talk about kindness. Like, don't mistake kindness for weakness. Like she also had that, that fierceness to her that if, would stick up for her people, and that had the ability to, would go to bat for her people and especially for her kids and her family. And it meant a lot. So but just that she was very strong in faith too. And you could tell that was huge. Her mindset was like phenomenal. Like I just wrote about that actually recently in the leadership blog that we have. But I remember, there was one time she just came out of it was called a sugar baker surgery. It was a 14-hour surgery. They essentially take every non-essential organ out of your body. They wash her insides with chemo, and very few people at her age would even have been able to do the surgery.
Go through that. No
and
kidding.
It's like a 40% success rate. And the doctors looked at her and were saying, yeah, no, I'm going to bet on you. It was kind of one of those, like, they met her and the doctor was like, yeah, no, I'm going to do this. And she came out of that surgery and it happened in Halifax. And I remember being by her bedside and kind of, helping her clean up. And I was going through crazy turmoil in my life too, like personal life, going through a separation, going through some struggles with the business after COVID. It was in the heart of COVID. So COVID was affecting the mental, and I was just not in the best place myself. And so she's coming out of surgery, and I just remember being bedside, and she just kind of grabbed me and locked eyes with me. And she's like, okay, this is where we, focus in on the blessings, Curtis. This is where there's a lot of good. We have a lot of good in our life. And I remember just tearing up, and I'm like, here she is in absolute living hell. And her focus on mindset right now is focus on the blessings. She's in a hospital room, just came through a crazy surgery. So that just gives you a glimpse into the mindset and the type of person that she was. And I was blessed to have those 6 years with her. Because one of the things we talked about everything, stuff that you never normally would get to talk to your parents about, or maybe someone close. there was nothing left unsaid. I knew some of the things that I just didn't understand. You know, she kind of took a back seat. My dad was the entrepreneur and was the front, but the foundation was her, and some of the struggles and some of the sacrifices that she had to make for our family. She almost has the back door,
behind the scenes, juicy kind of stuff, eh?
Well, and she, you know, just some of the sacrifices that she made, and you know, the challenges that she faced that never really opened up about, or you know, life lessons that she had. So I was blessed to have, you know, no regrets. Like, we opened up and were able to share everything, and but it was, that you know, faith and just empathy, her ability to like see another person's perspective, or like without judgment, and just solid resilience. I mean, my grandmother, it's crazy that the line of strong women, but my grandmother, you know, was diagnosed with MS in her 30s and was told she wouldn't walk, and then survived breast cancer, and she lived till she was 89 and was like her own businesswoman.
Wow.
And so like you know, there's good stock there, right? So
you had nothing to worry about for your daughter, eh?
Yeah, no. And but again too, like and the other thing, you know, I get choked up thinking about this, but I think she helped me understand about what being a man really was. Like, this whole...
How so?
Just, it's not ego. It's not power. It's not aggressiveness. It's having the ability to do that, but also like just that softer, loving, safe space. Like, create that safety. And maybe that's just the human side of it, but just this idea of, you know, masculinity isn't about, you know, power or dominance, you know, and I think it is. There's a willingness to be vulnerable and have that soft side and to be loving, but also, you know, that you have the ability to protect you, right? So it's that balance between, and I think, you know, being able to show up and showing that to my kids, it's made me a better dad. I think it's made me a better leader, a better friend, you know? And so it's something that I think, you know, both my mom and dad really encouraged that balance.
Do you think you would have had these conversations with your mother if she never would have got those diagnoses or that diagnosis?
I mean, we were open. Like, we definitely had, like, she was my person. And it's tough to go through life without, you know, realize how much that foundation's there, just to have someone just to call on any day, any time, and just whether it's listen. But so we were certainly open with each other, but not to that depth. I don't think we would have ever opened up to that. And again, the lesson there, you know, if I talk to listeners or other people that are listening in, it's have those conversations, because you don't know when it's going to be too late. And the last thing that, you know, you'd ever want is to regret not asking that question or not addressing a problem, or, you know, the other thing too, which I say is, you know, there's probably a lot of people that love each other, or that are like business partners that are sitting in resentment, and all it's going to take is like a conversation to bridge that gap. And what's life going to look like if you can actually bridge that gap? Yeah. So that's been a huge lesson for me, is like, you know, like the idea of forgiveness, or just giving someone a second chance, or just listening to them. And, you know, yeah, it's key. I think for me, I learned so much from those last 6 years, and again, I was going through my own shit. So not to relate it to stage 4 terminal cancer, but the ability that we could like have each other and talk openly about struggles and like lean on each other, you know, it was certainly special, something I'll never forget.
Yeah. And for people that are listening that are going through their own struggles right now, whether it be someone in their family sick, or, you know, good divorce, or, you know, heaven forbid anyone lose their child, or anything horrible happening, what would you tell them?
It almost goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You've got to feel it. Like, you've got to process it. You got to take it in. And as hard as it might be, you're the only person that's going to save yourself. there's a lot of people that can support you and lean on you, but at the end of the day, it's what can you do? It's you versus you in those moments. And it's like that, take the 8 count. I go back to Rocky and those moments where he's beaten and battered and, you take the 8 count, but at some point, like you got to figure out a way to take that next step. And honestly, it's like what we talked about before. It's stacking the small wins. So for me, when I was at my lowest of lows, it started with, I'm going to get up and drink a glass of water and do 50 jumping jacks. Like just to snap my head out of overthinking mode, out of depression. Like I have to do something. And then it was like, okay, I'm going to go outside. I'm going to walk. I'm going to go get some fresh air. So I say it's you versus you. One thing is don't ever be ashamed to ask for help. Like don't, because they can't do it for you. But the minute that you're open about it and there's a struggle, again, that vulnerability, you'd be amazed at how many people would have gone through something similar or are going to lean in to support you. I think we're worried about judgment oftentimes, about like not admitting that we're financially in a struggle or not admitting that we might be like depressed I was at the lowest of lows. And, there's some people that pop into my mind now. Like, I don't know where I would have been if I didn't have the ability just to talk to them and say like, hey, I've been in that dark spot. Like it's going to get better here, but again, it's like, what can you do next? Yeah. Is there one thing that you can do today that like would just maybe like start to lead you down to where you want to go?
It goes back to that personal accountability, right? Where you have to at least at the start look into inwards to say, okay, yes, horrible situation I'm in, but what am I going to do about it? How am I going to get myself out of it?
An anchor in purpose. Like, I don't know where I'd be without my kids. I was, lucky to have like, get choked up thinking about this. Like, as hard as it got, they looked at me as a superhero. Like, it didn't matter all of the failure that I've had, any of the mistakes that I made. Like, to those 2 children, I was a superhero. And it's like, hey, you gonna live up to that? Like, I could just, and it, like, I gotta do, again, caught, not taught. I was just hit. I was just took an 8 count. What am I going to, I have to show my kids, like, I can get back up. And this is part of life, right? And the struggles that we go through. So, ask for help. Try to stack some really small wins. So take away that what if and overthinking and thinking too far ahead. I'm going to go back to my mom. She'd always say, like, don't get too far ahead of yourself. What's the very next best thing that you can do that's going to be good for you? And maybe it is just getting outside, sitting outside and getting fresh air, or maybe it's making your bed. Maybe it's, getting a workout in, maybe it's calling a friend, whatever that is. But just, and also too, I would say, get out of your head. Oftentimes, like if we're just sitting spiraling, action is the antidote to anxiety. So the minute you start to move your feet, or you go into, that's why I did the jumping jacks, the minute you start to move your body or you go into action mode, your brain starts to focus on different things, problem solving or momentum. So if we're just sitting alone and, in our own misery, it's not a great place to be.
Curtis, what a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate you coming here and sharing your story with us. This is fantastic.
Yeah, no, I love it. And you've done a lot of work on the studio, and it's awesome to be here. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it's great.
You got it. My pleasure.